The broken covenant. For 3,000 years, the warning beacon had drifted in the void between star systems, its ancient Zanari script pulsing with a message that chilled any who could read it. Here lies the boundary of Sol 3 space. The pack. Hunters beyond this point are not to be disturbed. By order of the High Council, all vessels are to maintain distance. This is not a suggestion. This is survival. Commander Crix Volan of the Hegemony Supremacy Fleet stared at the translation with contempt burning in his 4 eyes. His massive frame, built for the heavy gravity of Nexus Prime, made the command bridge seem cramped despite its generous proportions. Around him, his officers waited in tense silence, their various alien forms unified only by their shared allegiance to hegemony expansion. Pack hunters, Crix spat, his mandibles clicking in disgust. The ancient Zanari were afraid of primitives, who hadn't even achieved faster-than-light travel when this beacon was placed. He gestured dismissively at the holographic display showing the warning. These humans are nothing more than a backwater species that stumbled into space technology. Their own records show they spent centuries killing each other over resources and territory. His aide, a nervous Sklani named Jex, shifted uncomfortably. Sir, the Zanari weren't known for issuing warnings lightly. Perhaps we should what? Crix's voice dropped to a dangerous growl. Report to High Command that we were frightened away by a 3,000-year-old ghost story? The hegemony doesn't retreat from shadows and superstition. Far across the galaxy, in the crystalline chambers of the Zanari homeworld, High Arbiter Velnash felt a disturbance that made his ancient scales shiver. At 4,000 years old, he was among the last of his kind who remembered the time before the warning. His memories stretched back to when the Zanari Empire had been young and arrogant, much like the hegemony was now. The meditation crystal before him flickered with urgent patterns. Someone had disturbed the boundary beacon. Someone had read the warning and chosen to ignore it. No, 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 Velnash whispered, his voice like wind through dry leaves. They cannot be so foolish. He summoned his aide, a younger Zanari named Thexmil whose scales still held the bright gold of youth. Send an emergency transmission to the hegemony fleet near Sol 3 space. Priority Alpha. High Arbiter, Thexmil said carefully. We have maintained neutrality with the hegemony for centuries. Direct contact would be preferable to witnessing another apocalypse. Velnash finished sharply. Do as I command. Meanwhile, in Minoensedan, the research station orbiting Kepler 442b, Dr. Sarah Chen was having what she thought would be her last normal day for a long time. The xenobiologist had been studying the unique ecosystem of the tidally locked planet below, when her communications array lit up with incoming traffic that made her blood run cold. This is Hegemony Commander Crix Volan to Human Research Station. The transmission crackled with static and barely contained aggression. You are in violation of hegemony expansion protocols. Surrender your vessel and prepare for inspection. Sarah's hands flew over her console, sending out the standard diplomatic response while her mind raced. The research station was barely armed, designed for science rather than conflict. Her crew of 12 scientists wouldn't stand a chance against a hegemony warship. Hegemony vessel, this is Dr. Sarah Chen, Station Commander. We are conducting peaceful research under interstellar law. This system has not been claimed by any government. Please state your legal authority for this demand. The response came in the form of weapons fire. Sarah threw herself behind her console as the station shuddered under the impact. Emergency lights bathed everything in red as hull breaches triggered automatic seals. Around her, her team scrambled. For emergency stations, their faces pale with shock and terror. All hands, this is the commander, Sarah announced over the intercom, surprised at how steady her voice sounded. We are under attack. Initiate emergency protocols and prepare to abandon station. Send distress signal to Earth Defense Corps. What Sarah didn't know was that her distress signal would do far more than summon help. It would trigger something that the galaxy hadn't seen in 3 millennia. Something that had prompted the Zanari to carve their desperate warning into stone and space. On Earth, Captain Maria Santos was enjoying her first day off in 3 months when her emergency communicator erupted with the most dreaded sound in the Defense Corps, the general alarm. Not a drill, not a training exercise, but the real thing. Citizens under attack. Within minutes, she was at Defense Command, where the Situation Room buzzed with grim activity. Admiral Jennifer Hayes, a woman whose gray hair spoke of 40 years, protecting Earth's interests, looked up as Maria entered. "We've got a situation, Captain. Research Station Kepler 442 is under attack by hegemony forces. Dr. Chen's team managed to get out a distress call before communications went dark." Maria felt something cold settle in her stomach. "How many civilians?" 12 scientists. All of them are people." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Maria watched as Admiral Hayes's expression hardened into something that would have made stone seem soft by comparison. "Admiral," Maria said carefully, "what are our orders?" Hayes turned to address the entire room. "Gentlemen, ladies, and distinguished beings, we have a code black situation. For the first time in 2 centuries, human civilians have been attacked without provocation by a hostile alien force." She paused, letting the weight of that sink in. "As of this moment, we are implementing the Humanity Protocol." A hush fell over the room. The Humanity Protocol was theoretical, something developed after humanity's expansion into space but never activated. It was based on a simple principle that every human understood instinctively, but no alien species had ever truly grasped. Humans were pack hunters, and an attack on one was an attack on all. Across human space, from the mining colonies of the asteroid belt to the research stations at the galaxy's edge, a message went out. Not through official channels, not through government communications, but through the networks that truly mattered. Social platforms, family connections, friendship networks, professional associations, and 1,000 other invisible threads that bound humanity together across the void. The message was simple. They hurt our people. What happened next would have been impossible for any other species to achieve, and incomprehensible for them to understand. Within hours, human civilian vessels throughout the galaxy began to move. Not in formation, not under military command, but with a coordination that emerged from something deeper than orders or training. Dr. James Wright, a xenopsychology professor at New Cambridge University, was analyzing hegemony behavioral patterns when his research took on sudden, deadly importance. His academic paper on hegemony pack structure became a war plan. His student dissertation on hegemony weakness became a battle strategy. And across 1,000 worlds, 10,000 scientists, engineers, traders, miners, farmers, and dreamers began to work together with a unity that no government had ever achieved and no alien species had ever imagined possible. Back in the Zenari chambers, Vel Nash received the response to his warning message. Commander Crix's reply was brief and dismissive. "Ancient superstitions hold no authority over hegemony expansion. Sol 3 system will be pacified according to standard protocols." Vel Nash's scales turned pale with terror. He had seen this before. 3,000 years ago, when the Zenari had been the ones ignoring warnings about the pack hunters from Sol 3. He had been young then, eager for glory and expansion. He had learned at terrible cost why some species survived by avoiding conflict rather than seeking it. "Thexmil," he called, his voice trembling with age and memory. "Send word to the Council. We must prepare for what comes next." "High Arbiter, surely you don't believe that humans could threaten the hegemony? They have barely a dozen warships compared to the hegemony's thousands." Vel Nash looked at his young aide with eyes that had seen the rise and fall of civilizations. "My dear Thexmil, you misunderstand the nature of the threat. The humans will not fight the hegemony." "Then what?" "They will teach the hegemony to fight itself." As the first human vessels began to move through jump space, carrying not weapons of war but something far more dangerous, Vel Nash settled into his meditation chamber and began to prepare for the storm that was coming. Because he remembered what happened the last time someone had been foolish enough to attack a human research station. The galaxy was about to remember why the pack hunters of Sol 3 were best left alone. The pack awakens. 3 days after the attack on research station Kepler 442, Commander Crix Volan was beginning to question his certainty about human weakness. Not because of any military response. The humans had sent exactly 0 warships toward hegemony space. Instead, something far more unsettling was happening. His supply lines were falling apart. "Sir!" His logistics officer, a methodical Vrathan named Keck, approached with a datapad that seemed to grow heavier with each report. "We have 17 more supply convoys reporting irregularities." Irregularities? Crix's mandibles clicked, impatiently. "Explain." "Well, sir, the Zephron Trading Consortium canceled their food shipment contracts. They claim a better offer came up. The Altarian Mining Guild suddenly decided their raw materials are needed elsewhere. Our ammunition suppliers are experiencing what they call temporary production difficulties." Crix stared at the datapad, his 4 eyes narrowing. "These are all species we've had trade agreements with for decades. They wouldn't dare. There's more, sir." Keck's voice dropped to almost a whisper. 3 of our allied fleets have reported similar issues. The Hegemony Council is receiving complaints from 17 different sectors about supply problems. What Commander Crix didn't understand, what no hegemony strategist could have predicted, was that they weren't fighting humans at all. They were fighting something much more dangerous: human ideas. Dr. James Wright had never considered himself a warrior. At 43, he was more comfortable with academic papers than battle plans, more at home in lecture halls than command centers. But when the news of the research station attack reached him, something changed. Not anger. Humans had learned to control anger, something colder and far more effective. "Every species has pressure points," he explained to the growing network of volunteers who had gathered in what was once his xenopsychology classroom. The room now buzzed with economists, engineers, sociologists, psychologists, and a dozen other specialists whose day jobs had suddenly become weapons of war. "The hegemony relies on a complex web of alliances and trade relationships," Dr. Wright continued, pulling up holographic displays that showed the intricate connections between hegemony, space, and the rest of the galaxy. "They're strong militarily, but they're vulnerable economically and psychologically." Sarah Kim, an economist from New Seoul, raised her hand. "You're talking about economic warfare?" "I'm talking about something more fundamental," Wright replied. "Humans have something that no other species truly understands. We're social creatures, at a galactic level. When we form connections, we form them not just with each other, but with everyone we meet. We make friends." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. "The Zephron traders who supply hegemony food convoys," Wright continued. 3 of their clan leaders have human grandchildren through intermarriage. The Altarian miners have been trading with human colonies for 60 years. We've been teaching their children our languages, sharing our music, our stories, our dreams. Maya Patel, a communications specialist, began to smile. "You're not talking about threatening them, you're talking about asking them for help." "Exactly. The hegemony sees trade partners and vassal states. We see neighbors and friends, and when you attack someone's neighbor, someone's friend," Wright's smile was colder than empty space. "Well, neighbors help neighbors. Across the galaxy, the requests went out through channels that no military intelligence could have predicted or monitored. Not through official diplomatic networks, but through the quiet connections that humans had been building for 2 centuries of peaceful expansion. Hey, remember my daughter's wedding? You sent that beautiful crystal sculpture from your homeworld. My son says you taught him to play that card game. He still plays it with his kids. We've been trading for decades. You've always been fair with us, treated us like family. I know this is asking a lot, but they attacked our people, our scientists. Would you mind not selling them supplies for a while?" And across 1,000 worlds, in 1,000 different languages, the answer came back the same. Of course, family helps family. Commander Crix was learning about human warfare the hard way. Every supply convoy that failed to arrive weakened his fleet. Every ally that suddenly discovered urgent business elsewhere reduced his support. Every trade route that experienced unexpected delays made his position more precarious. But the real horror began when his own troops started asking questions. It started with the Nexari, a warrior species that had joined the hegemony seeking glory in battle. Private Zach 7 had been monitoring human communications, standard intelligence gathering, when he discovered something that changed everything. The humans were talking about the Nexari, Not as enemies, not as threats, but with something that sounded like concern. Did you see the report about the Nexari soldiers in the hegemony fleet? One human transmission read, "They're just kids. Most of them are barely adults, sent to die for an empire that sees them as expendable." "The Nexari homeworld is beautiful," another message said. "I visited there 5 years ago for a cultural exchange. Their poetry is incredible, their art. These young soldiers probably just want to make their families proud. I hope they make it home safely." Zax 7 stared at the transmission logs, his understanding of the war crumbling. The humans weren't angry at him. They were worried about him. They were hoping he would survive. He wasn't the only one. Across the hegemony fleet, soldiers who had been monitoring human communications were discovering something that no military training had prepared them for. Their enemies were hoping they would live. The psychological impact was devastating. It's one thing to fight an enemy who hates you. It's entirely different to fight someone who's concerned about your well-being. Back on Earth, Captain Maria Santos was coordinating the most unusual military operation in human history. No shots had been fired, no weapons deployed, yet the hegemony fleet was crumbling from within. "Status report," Admiral Hayes requested during their daily briefing. "Hegemony Fleet Omega is reporting 60% supply shortfall," Maria replied, consulting her datapad. "Their morale is down to critical levels. Intelligence suggests they're experiencing mass desertion among conscripted species." "What about our research station survivors?" Maria's expression softened slightly. "Dr. Chen and her team were recovered by the Zephron trading vessel Bright Star. They're receiving medical treatment and should be home within the week." Admiral Hayes nodded grimly. "And Commander Crix?" "According to our sources, he's requested emergency reinforcements from Hegemony High Command. The request was denied. They're dealing with similar supply issues across 17 sectors." What neither of them mentioned, what didn't need to be said, was that the human response was just beginning, because Dr. Wright's Psychological Warfare Division had discovered something interesting about hegemony command structure. It was based entirely on fear and dominance. And humans, as any psychologist could tell you, were exceptionally good at making bullies understand the error of their ways. In the Zenari chambers, High Arbiter Velnash watched the reports with a mixture of admiration and ancient terror. This was exactly what had happened 3,000 years ago, when the Zenari Empire had made the same mistake as the hegemony. "The humans haven't fired a single weapon," Thexmill observed, reading the intelligence reports. "Yet the hegemony fleet is in full retreat. This is how they fight." Velnash replied quietly. "Not with violence, but with understanding. They learned everything about their enemies, not to destroy them, but to save them from themselves." "I don't understand." Velnash's ancient eyes held memories of a younger, more foolish time. The humans could crush the hegemony with weapons if they chose, but instead they're showing them a better way to live. They're teaching their enemies that there's strength in cooperation, that there's power in friendship, that there's victory in peace. And if the hegemony refuses to learn, then the hegemony will discover what happens when you attack the friends and families of pack hunters who have turned diplomacy into an art form and kindness into a weapon. Commander Crix's final transmission to Hegemony High Command was brief and bitter. "Request immediate withdrawal from Sol 3 space. Human response has neutralized fleet effectiveness without engagement. Recommend avoiding all future contact with human territories." The response was equally brief. "Withdrawal approved. You are relieved of command." As the hegemony fleet limped away from human space, their supply lines severed, their allies deserting, and their soldiers questioning everything they'd been taught about war, Dr. Wright was already working on the next phase of the human response. Reconstruction aid, cultural exchange programs, educational scholarships for young hegemony citizens, trade agreements that benefited everyone involved. Because that was the thing about humans that no alien species ever quite understood. They didn't just win their wars. They turned their enemies into friends. They took species that had attacked them and showed them a better way to live, a better way to grow, a better way to reach for the stars. And 3,000 years after the Zanari had carved their warning into stone and space, the galaxy learned once again why the pack hunters of Sol 3 were not to be disturbed. Not because they were dangerous when angry, but because they were irresistible when kind.